Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Vertical Reach podcast. This is where storytelling meets strategy. I'm Pauline Gray, and each week I sit down with the creators, innovators, and voices shaping the world of vertical storytelling. Let's tell stories that connect. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Vertical Reach podcast. A bit about the show. The vertical reach is that moment when you extend upward, physically or professionally or emotionally, when you want to meet what exists above where you're standing right now, when the same level is no longer enough for you. Vertical reach is the act of rising to meet what's higher, whether it's your body, your work, or your ambition. My show, the Vertical Reach podcast, is a podcast about people who didn't just pivot careers, they changed altitude. This season focuses on filmmakers and creators entering or thriving in the vertical microdrama space as part of a larger integration or reinvention of themselves and their careers. The goal here is to document and share real-time transitions, not some sort of polished hindsight. And today in the guest chair, we have screenwriter Adrion Trujillo, a real trailblazer in the space. Award-winning writer Adrion Trujillo has shaped standout series and format-defining experiments across Pocket FM, Drama Box, and Pine Drama. His work ranges from top-performing male-frequency sagas to bold creative trials that broaden the emotional vocabulary of the format. His most recent show, Chained to My Nemesis, is currently number 1 on the platform. Some other credits, Pocket FM, have been My Vampire System, Duke's Masked Wife, and Instant Empire. For Drama Box and Pine Drama, Jacked Janitor versus Golden Boy, which a lot of you guys know about. It's quite the hit. And for shorts, Keep Your Ring on President Now, which I think is still number 1, pretty high up on the chart.
It was number 1 for about 3 weeks, but Chained to My Nemesis is now currently number 1.
So back to back. I love it. So Chained to My Nemesis is current number 1, coming off of Keep Your Ring and President Now. And Adrion, why don't you just jump in real quick and kind of give us a quick sort of survey of your own interpretation of your meteoric rise and walk through a day of your busy life.
Yeah. In the last 2 months, I have worked on 8 projects for Viglu, Shorts, Drama Pops, and My Drama, as well as indie projects for National Lampoon. So currently, I don't know because there's not a good way to measure this, but I'm pretty sure I might be the most, I might be working the most of any vertical freelancer currently. It's been a wild 2 months. My day today is working actively on both development and active writing on 1 or 2 shows at a time. And then I have a team of writers that work under me who I hire to co-write shows when I'm at capacity, overseeing the progress that they're making and doing corrections, giving notes, that sort of thing, so that we can meet a number of clients and their expectations all at once.
Amazing. We're going to discuss those expectations in a second. Tell us more about your background and what was the moment when you realized that your horizontal growth and the space you're functioning most recently had capped out, and you said it's time to reach higher.
Yeah, so I moved to LA in 2019 with my husband when networking in the Portland film industry kind of dried up, and I moved down to LA sort of expecting things to be better. Only for the pandemic to happen and then the writer's strike. And I mean, even between the pandemic and the writer's strike, networking events were abysmal. I was active, I was writing spec in pilot format, writing specs features, and I was submitting them to contests, the Red List, the Black List, the Page Awards, all of these different places. I was doing pretty well, but nothing ever materialized out of any of that until one day on Twitter, I was just scrolling and I saw a post by a guy named Christian Rowe who was like, hey, I'm putting together a room of writers circling the drain in Hollywood, out of work TV writers. If you know anyone like that, submit their CV or their resume website or whatever to this email. And I didn't fit the list of qualifications in terms of being a TV writer and having worked on a show and stuff. But I submitted just sort of as a whim. And the first interview that he called me in for about 3 months later, the first thing he said when he got on the call was like, hey, dude, I just want to let you know that I have no intention of giving you this job because I don't think you're qualified. You haven't worked on anything. I can't name any of the things that you've worked on. So, I'm sorry, I know I'm wasting your time, but I just wanted to reach out because there's this guy on your resume website that was in one of my table reads. How do you know Dan? So when I got over this feeling like, yeah, he's wasting my time, right? We just shot the shit for about 3 hours, talking about Dungeons and Dragons, where did you go to school, Avatar: The Last Airbender, how much we love that show. And when the conversation was over, he was like, "You know what, dude? You seem great. If you have anything you want to send me, I'll read it. And if I like it, I'll pass it along to the next guy. But you do not want this job. Everything in vertical sucks. People are getting fired left and right. If they're not, they're quitting. The pay is bad. The return, like the turnaround times are bad. Everything is bad." And basically tried to convince me not to go for the next interview. But 3 interviews later, I had a job at Pocket FM, and it was funny because I would talk to people about the job that I had and the work that we did, and people were like, "Oh, you're working in verticals? You're working in verticals? That's so sad. That's so unfortunate. Like you're so much better than this format." And now like those same people, of course, are like begging to work at companies and hitting me up for connections and stuff. I think it, like, in terms of like the moment where I decided to reach vertically, I think it was just like saying yes. I mean, I was desperate enough, really, saying yes to something that I didn't know what I was signing on for. I thought I was, just joining a company.
And
Yeah, I thought I was joining this company to write web video, and I didn't think it was very special or great, but then the person sitting across from me in my first meeting was an assistant writer on Game of Thrones, and several of the other people were in the office. They'd worked for some really, really big people, Mr. Beast. They had worked for television programs. So like I was suddenly feeling like outclassed, and I thought at first I didn't belong there suddenly. And I wrote some show for them, some rom-com, and they loved it so much that they greenlit it for production, only for marketing and these other departments to eventually flag it and kill it. But they decided they had bought this IP called My Vampire System that they were trying to find a writer who they felt was adequate. And I got added to a Slack channel my third week at the company, where the first message was from the CEO, and he was like, "I need you to find me a writer who's actually good to handle this $4 million property that we had just bought." And there was my boss, Steven Botso, saying, "This is Adrion Trujillo. He's the best writer we have."
what?
And yeah, so I had to kill the imposter syndrome in me really, really quickly and just kind of start saying yes to more things and believe that I could do it and believe that I did deserve to be there. And, over time, I've never really lost that audacity. I think some of these companies, they try to kill it in you, the like creative spirit that says like, hey, we can push boundaries. We can learn this format and then make new stuff, push it further. There are companies who are so terrified of that they try to kill it. But I think, Jacked Janitor is a good example of a show that like is a huge success now. When it released, it was a flop on Drama Box, and
Was that marketing, you think, or
I can't speculate as to the reason why, but I think probably it had something to do with their handling of the ads. Yeah, probably. I think what's interesting is that you can say that you can make a big swing and sometimes it doesn't work out, and then it gets onto another platform and it flourishes. Yeah, so just this week I found out that show was on the platform, had been sold to the platform, and that it was doing exceedingly well there. So it's still kind of hitting me because for the last year I've thought we just made a bomb.
when I first met you, that had just come out?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, amazing. So, what was the biggest surprise about vertical storytelling that you felt you encountered along the journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started, I thought these things were so soulless and devoid of creativity. And that maybe is true of the working environment that we were working under Pocket in 2023 or 2024. But I think when my first or second week at Drama Box, I had this realization that I was in a writer's room working on what is ostensibly television on your phone, and that television, as it started, as it began, was considered like a trash medium for, these undesirable audience members
Yeah. The common
because
masses, yeah.
yeah, the common masses of, let's be honest, like it's the common masses of women that partially that's
Soap
why
operas.
people look down on this medium because of who enjoys it, right? And I realized that that was the core foundational demographic of television. That's the core foundational demographic of this stuff. Eventually, it's like a matter of time. It's an inevitability that as, we get to year 10 of Vertical's existing, that there will be people who are specifically fans of Vertical and that those fans will grow big enough to have their own cultural movement, this focal point of people who have Instagrams and blogs that talk about it and share the ones that they like the best, and that those people become this foundational audience for these things at some point in the future. And once that happens, then you start making verticals for them, and this thing has the ability to grow and evolve into something resembling normal TV for women. And then once that happens, things can evolve so that it broadens into other audiences as well. I mean, I'm maybe one of the only people to have like genuine repeated success targeting the male demographic. Personally, I think that we could be expanding audiences right now. And it's something I try to convince every company to let me do, but they don't always. But this thing is just TV on your phones. And when I realized that I've been hoping to one day progress out of vertical into my dream job. And when I had that realization, I realized this is my
You've
dream job.
landed.
I am in a writer's room working on television. Now, we're all working on different shows, but we were breaking story together. We were creating worlds together. That is the life that I had dreamed of, and I had made it.
Amazing, amazing. So congratulations. Let's acknowledge that. And my question for you now is, can we take a moment to discuss the writer's room as it's exhibited or executed in the vertical space? We'll take a moment, if you don't mind, to discuss how in episodic television, TV on your TV, television on your television, I guess, for those entering the space with curiosity, sure 90% of the people know in a TV writer's room, of course, jump in, that you may have 8 to 12 writers, and those writers are supervised by a showrunner. There's definitely a hierarchy of titles within, but the showrunner for the executive vision of the show. And depending on the structure of the writer's room, you may have 6, 8 weeks, say, would you say, when you break the season down?
Yeah.
When we say if it's now let's say a 13 season episode versus the 24 like we had in the past. Let's say it's 12, 13 episodes now. And then you would I'd say systematically go through and break down the season and then be a writer's assistant. Well, this is in the in-person days. You have a writer's assistant at the whiteboard, furiously writing things down, and of course, or tracking some way. And then you would have an episode assigned to you as individual writer for like episode number 5, for example.
Hmm.
And you would then, after you broke story, you would then maybe be allowed to leave the actual breaking story brainstorming room and like quote unquote go home to write. Broad strokes. I'm sure there are many variables on that theme, but tell me though now, you're saying that in your writer's room, you are sort of synergizing multiple. You take it from here.
Yeah. So, I mean, every company who has rooms it does them differently, right? With respect to Drama Box, the room that I experience is not the same room that exists there now.
Mm.
The people are different. The structure is different. The job titles are all different. So, I can only speak to what it was like at the time, right? At the time when I was hired, we had a head writer who was head of the department, head of development, and she assigned genres to us to pitch from specific types of stories she wanted from some of the writers, right? So we would pitch log lines and try to get something done. And we could pitch outside the genre that was assigned to us. That was fine. But, there were certain people who she sort of expected werewolf from, or people who were quote unquote experts of one thing or another. So we would pitch a show to her, open in front of everyone. She would sort of ask the room's opinion.
Okay.
They would talk about it. They would help break down the log line together, right? Punch it up in that moment. At the end of it, she would either say, this needs more work, or we would be good to go on writing an outline.
Okay.
And the outline was like, it was like you write the first 10 episodes, essentially, like a beat for beat of everything that happens in the first 10 episodes. And then just these broad paragraphs about what happens in every other cycle of the show after that point, which is, by the way, not how I run my room currently. I think it's very important that when breaking a vertical, you are getting a beat for beat of every single episode.
So 70,
Not
90
not just
beats.
treat everything else like it's an afterthought. Yeah, 70 to 90. Yeah, 3 beat structure. But anyway, when it comes to this room, it would take like 2 weeks for us to work through the process of getting an outline approved. And when it got approved, then we were sent to write the full episode. And then when a series got written, we would take it back. Everyone was supposed to read it. We would have these weekly meetings where everyone read everyone's scripts and what they were working on, either they're in the outline form or in the script form, and people would give notes. And then we would be responsible to implement those notes within a day or two.
Oh,
And
okay.
then, then it was sent for grading
An
and then
A
sent to
or B
production.
or what's
A, B,
grading?
C. It's Asian grading system, so they start at S and then end at
Superb.
D. Yeah, S for superb and D for defunct. I don't know. But a D is an F and an S is an A, basically. So when I wrote Jacked Janitor, it was an A plus, and then when
S plus. It's S plus.
it was an A plus, it was an A
That's
plus on
it's
at
S
Drama
plus.
Box. So a B plus in American.
Okay.
And it got approved for production. It was great. The writers at the time at Drama Box got to like live in they got to live in the production for far longer. We were in charge of informing the marketing, the general thrust and direction of the show. We were
Was
told,
feedback, collaborative, suggestive.
well, more like directive. We were told to just write out a document sort of explaining how best to market the show, even though, some of us might not have marketing degrees or have had any prior marketing experience. We were told to dictate for marketing what the most important moments of the show were, the important clips, right? And then we would go in pre-production. We were part of casting. We would review the sides that were sent to the actors. In production, we would go to set. We would give notes on set. We were always on call. This is true at Pocket FM as well. We were always on call, where the director of the production could call us and ask us a question on how to fix something. And there was a chain of command. Like, the writer could not usurp the EP or the creative producer. Right. But we were show running is the issue, right? Because we're doing the main thrust of basically every creative decision starts with us on the script page. But then on top of that, we were the ones filling out all of the documents for how these things.
Yeah, you were EPing. You're executive producing. And
Essentially,
right.
yes. But
Wow.
that's not
Right.
how we were credited, which, I'm sure at some point someone can tell you about all of the behind the scenes drama, but it doesn't matter to me anymore. But vertical writing is interesting because right now this system of how to do this effectively is so new that there are people who are struggling for power and recognition in the jobs that they do. The producers want to be known as the core artists of this medium. The writers want to be known as the core artists of this medium. The directors want to be known as the core artists of this medium. But to be honest, none of those jobs make sense as the auteur except for the writer, because when we pitch these shows, we pitch them from the perspective of how the ads are going to play on screen. So we're not thinking post-production, pre-production, production. We're thinking of post-post. From day one, we are thinking of marketing. And no other medium of storytelling does that. The writer is king in vertical, but the writer isn't treated like king. That's sort of my core issue with this industry right now is that it hasn't woken up to the fact that the writers are so important to this process, that almost no one in this process is given enough time to do their jobs effectively except for the writer. And the writer knows how these stories are supposed to flow better than anyone else because of
Interesting.
that.
What I was gonna ask, my next question was organically gonna be, what carried over from your previous work? But I'm curious now, as someone who's familiar with the traditional Hollywood, even just crediting struggles and history, what you described to me, to a certain extent, is sort of I don't know if it's a residue or a ghost or a leftover of sort of the ongoing struggles between writer, director, now actors are producing and actors are having things written for them. And
Yes.
so what I'm curious about though is how much of you think these current struggles are like sort of a residue of Hollywood history and how much is there just a new flux of energy and thought that's going to shift this?
I mean, no one's going to admit it, but none of the producers who produce Vertical want to produce Vertical. Like they don't want this to be the end all be all of their career, right? So getting a credit like executive producer, it matters to them in a way that there is like constant discussion within these companies about credits and what people get to be called, because people are worried that if they're not credited correctly, that they won't be able to build a career post Vertical.
Mm,
The problem is that this ignores the practicalities of the situation. EPs do a lot. I work with a lot of producers. I love how much they contribute to this space. They do contribute a lot, and especially if they have a history in web video or marketing, their knowledge of how to translate a script, like, it's invaluable. But producers spend way less time on these things than the writers do, and the writers carry through everything through every point in the process. And some companies are learning because they don't have, maybe they create separations where the writer has to be standoff after a certain point, right? And like at shorts, the writers don't give input on the edit, or they don't go to set. But these companies are learning gradually that having the writers there is actually not just helpful but necessary.
real time, real time changes, real time, thought, just another brilliant brain in the mix, and they know the material the best.
Right.
They can fix and tweak and adjust, nimbly in real time.
Right. Well, think about it from the perspective of a director. A director might get 3, maybe 4, 5, if they're lucky, weeks of prep time on a show. But those weeks that they spent prepping, they are also, because they're trying to make rent in Los Angeles, spent prepping other shows that they're working on,
And they're stacking
right?
and horizontally and layering and
They're stacking work between projects, so they can't focus on everything at once. When it comes to the day of filming, they are filming sometimes 12, 16, 30 pages in a day. I heard about a production that did 30-page days. I really want to know what those were like, because I can't even imagine that. But
what
the
caught
point
with
is that
between shots, yeah.
in vertical, we're always encouraged to direct on the page as much as possible for this reason, because the actors, the directors, even the producers, they don't have enough time to really digest the material and understand it completely, like on a more layered or nuanced level than you can when you're filming 30-page days. So having a writer say what emotion an actor is supposed to be feeling in this moment, or just spelling out the subtext of a scene in the action line, like, these help the
Curious, he looked at
director. Yes, though that would be considered bad form in normal screenwriting. It is helpful. I have never had a director complain about that, and I have had companies dictate that we do it specifically for this reason, because the working conditions of verticals are so quick, so fast, that there is no one who actually has time to sit and think about anything except for me,
backstory,
right?
motivation. What motivates the werewolf?
Right. They're jumping onto a project.
Yeah.
There was, on the National Lampoon show that we just did, Cayman Cardiff was filming for 2 weeks in Tampa, got on a plane back to LA, and started his first day on a new production
Wow.
a day later, right? So this is how quickly vertical moves. So it's interesting. I do think some of it is like the Hollywood, the power struggles, moving forward. But to be honest, I think that writers get screwed in the industry as well in
That's
terms
what, yeah,
of
that's what I mean.
the
Yeah.
way that they're credited and the amount of work that they do, especially on television. But I would say that a movie, in contrast to a vertical, like a director working on a movie, has a lot more time to sink their teeth in and really change the narrative and shape it in the way that they deem necessary to tell the story that they
Years.
would like to create, right? And the reason that they do that oftentimes is not because what the writer wrote was bad, but because the writer doesn't have the same brain as the director. So the looking at the same material, they're looking at the same thing differently. The director needs to feel comfortable with the material and it really feel like it's theirs, right? So they make those changes. And in a film, I totally agree that a director is like that is the author, quote unquote, of a movie. But in vertical, if I am dictating the direction of marketing when I am pitching the logline, if I'm talking about the best marketing moments, if I have to name my 5 CPI moments when I'm pitching a show, then like everything should be defaulting to the writer. We're inventing IP in 3 to 5 days. We're breaking story on an entire season of television. Yes, it's only an hour long, but if you count the events that happen in a vertical, it's basically a season of TV. And then on top of that, we are making this very big decision, which could be a life and death decision for the show, right? What the marketing is supposed to look like, the angle it's supposed to take. And if you get that wrong, the show could tank and the marketing just blames you, the writer. So like
But
we have
if
to
you
take on
do,
this enormous responsibility, and yet we are not paid nearly as much as some of the other people in this chain.
there's definitely a dynamic between reflective of the role and level of respect that writers, regardless of medium, get. Even, but when I think about it honestly, I think the music industry may well be, as far as the monetary compensation,
Hmm.
the only industry in which the writer of the material, their compensation is adequately compensated, regardless of how anonymous they actually are. You look at, like, say, like a Diane Warren, for example, one of the greatest songwriters of all time. I have no idea. I'm not interested in her net worth. I'm sure it's massive, but the people that she's written songs for are superstars, and they can't go to Trader Joe's or go to the grocery store and just grab some milk off the shelf, you know? But sure, she could just go and just pump her gas and, you know, never know, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah, as a writer, it's very interesting because you do definitely have to kind of ride this sort of dynamic of like, I'm invisibly conducting this train. And if I go off the rails, everyone gets hurt though,
Yeah.
you know? And so I've got a question for you. This show really is about what happens in terms of verticals being life after producing.
Hmm.
In the sense, I'm speaking myself, I'm a 30-year screenwriter. We talk about doing 30 pages a day. I'm a script supervisor. That's my day-to-day bread and butter. And so I can't imagine,
Yeah.
the cramps in my hands alone
Yeah.
if I script supervise 30 pages in a day, much less as an actor learning the dialogue, as a director. I mean, dressing the set. Are you dressing the set? And are you, how does that even work? If you're production design, are you busy? Are you prepping upstairs while shooting downstairs and you're switching around? Logistics of that seems, I can't even imagine how that would work logistically. But my question for you is, I personally went to verticals as life after producing. And you're saying producers are looking at life after verticals. And I personally, just my own diagnosis, is that given the current industry itself, there is no life after verticals. That's it.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah. So I'm just
I
curious, please, I love your insight on that.
No, I mean, I think that verticals are just going to keep expanding and becoming more and more relevant. I have meetings with people right now, traditional Hollywood people you wouldn't believe. I have meetings on the docket that I'm very much looking forward to discuss making verticals. How can Hollywood get into verticals? So it's very interesting to me how this is shaping. There's two schools of thought, I think. There are people who want, to just get their credits so that they can move on and out and up. And then there are people who think this is a new space we are creating for ourselves, and they become like these very rigid gatekeepers where they see Hollywood coming in and moving into
Yeah.
this space as like a huge threat to them. And maybe, I don't know. I can't predict the future. I guess that this wider adoption of verticals by Hollywood might end up pushing some of us out. But I actually don't think that's true, because I think that Hollywood, because everyone has a kind of hubris if they've been successful on any level. They think that they know how to do everything. So Hollywood is going to jump in, and it's going to crash and burn in the ways that, I mean, we've already seen it crash and burn at some of these American companies who have entered this space just with the blind ambition of like, oh, well, we know how film and television works, so we're going to
Water and
walk
mix.
in and yeah, add water and mix, elevate the medium, right? And they've not there's been very little success doing that. So they've all just started copying what the Chinese companies are doing, right? So I do think that there's a great opportunity for people like me, or like, the producers of Dropbox, like all of these people who have been in this space for a long time, to jump over to Hollywood and show them the ropes. I think that this medium is going to keep expanding and become more and more of the mainstream media consumption habit, right? Like the people are going to watch verticals like they watch TV, like they watch anything. Someone said it's the fourth visual medium or something
I just read that. I just read that.
recently, which I agree.
So the problem's happening
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Covered. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the tagline for a conference. And I
Yeah.
think it's true. That is what this is going to be. So I think it's naive to think that there's going to be a life after verticals. And honestly, if there's anything I have learned in my journey through this career so far, is like, don't let people say no, or don't hear the no's that you get and internalize that as like, you got to build your own path at some
Exactly.
point,
Absolutely.
right? Say yes to the opportunities that arise and figure out where those can take you. Figure out your next step from there. Don't be another person in your life saying.
Exactly. And this is really wrapping up lovely. I mean, because you're really getting to the theme of my episode. So let me ask you this, Adrian. You're killing it in the bromance. Is it boy? What's the correct term?
Well, Jacked Janitor is not a boy love, but I did write my first 3 boy loves I wrote this month. All me. I didn't use assistant writers on any of these. I wrote those for the first time, but I am killing it in other genres in the space. Obviously, like My Vampire System and Jacked Janitor are huge successes on Pine Drama and Pocket FM. So yeah, I killed it in the male drama genre. I hate that genre because it's not, those are two totally different shows. But I also, Chained to My Nemesis is a big hit for shorts right now, and that is just a romance. I'm very capable of writing anything, if any people are watching.
I love it. So, but Adrian, so tell us, what is your next swipe up? When I say your next swipe up, I just hope for this, you maybe flip the space. When you're watching the show, literally on your phone, you swipe up.
Yeah.
Visually experience to swipe up. And metaphorically, what I mean is that, like, so now for Adrian, what is your next reach? What is your next horizon?
I think like career ambitions, I would love to run a room. I run a room right now with the subcontractors that I work with currently. We meet on a pretty regular basis to work through the projects that we've been assigned. But I would love to work for a company doing that as head of creative or head of content. But as far as like the next, what's sort of immediately on the horizon, I just wrote 2 seasons of a show called National Lampoon's Alpha Academy.
Okay.
For National Lampoon, and I'm very excited. It's a comedy. It's a broad comedy, one of the first of its kind in vertical. We don't know where it's landing yet. They're still looking for a distributor, but expect it very soon. As for, vertical, I just wrote one for shorts. I wrote shorts' first ever boy love.
Okay.
And I just wrote a boy love for Viglu called Bussy and the Beast.
We're talking about
I'm not sure it will get called that when it comes out. We'll see.
Working title.
Yeah. I can't give the logline for that, unfortunately, but I think you could figure it out from the title.
Not my genre, but
Yeah, and I have one for Drama Pops. I have 2 shows for My Drama coming out. I am working constantly, incessantly on a number of things at once, and I'm very excited because I think things were really slow in January and December. I left Drama Box in October, but 8 projects under my belt in the last 2 months.
You're doing all right.
That's pretty good. I'm doing all right.
All right. So let me ask you this.
Mhm.
The Vertical Reach podcast, this show is really my personal therapeutic experience, quite honestly. And I'm loving sharing and learning from my guests. What I'm curious about is, regardless of whether it's from traditional production, traditional medium to verticals, whether it's any sort of career pivot, I think you kind of said a little bit ago about be your own yes. No, and don't wait for someone to tell you no, yes, or no. Don't wait about getting permission or conducting a survey. But just speaking broadly now, if there's someone who wants to make a major life shift to transition, it's been percolating for a while. They've been kind of wondering, should I not? What would you say to them to accelerate their vertical reach?
Yeah, I would say if it depends on what your career path is. If you're a director, start directing an independent vertical or direct commercials, right? And submit those to vertical companies. If you are a writer, just go on LinkedIn and say that you write verticals. You will get emails. You will get your first shot. Then before you write that vertical, find a vertical writer to help you, to teach you the format, preferably not someone who, there are a lot of people in this space who teach classes. I'm sure those classes are lovely. Do background research and see what verticals they have watched. Do you like their style of writing? Have they written a hit? And then approach a person who has. Right? If you are a producer and you're wanting to produce an independent vertical, find a writer who works in this space already. Don't just get your screenwriting friend who's never written a vertical before to write one. They're written the way that they're written for very specific reasons. I was told we're not allowed to do a step-by-step guide, so I will forgo that information. But yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of people who are entering this space and throwing a lot of money at the problem right now, and they're finding not good returns, especially in the independent space. So I feel very bad sometimes for these indie producers who enter and end up wasting a lot of money. So find someone who can actually speak to what makes these things successful so that your project is given the best chance for success. You can't guarantee anything in Hollywood, especially in vertical, right? But you can try and give yourself the best foundation to build from. That's my recommendation.
Amazing. So we're gonna wrap here. Thank you so much, Adrian. So much insight. I mean, I just feel like I've learned more in this past session about sort of the inner working intricacies of the vertical, political, industrial machine complex that I have in a long time that I ever had before. And to my audience, I just want to say, whether you're building something new or becoming someone new, keep checking in here at the Vertical Reach. And remember, keep swiping up. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Vertical Reach podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If it sparked something for you, please share it with a fellow storyteller. Until next time, let's tell stories that can.